I'm on a boat on my way to a landmass that means a lot to me, but this place has had a wild and wacky population pattern over the years.
In 1600, the population of Ireland was around 2 million people. By 1840, that number had grown to 8.5 million people. Just 10 years later, it had shrunk to 6.5 million, continuing on a slump to 1926 when it reached a dip of 4 million people. We're now up to 7 million people, which is a lot higher, but still somewhat less than it was at its peak in 1840. So what has caused such erratic behaviour in the population of this landmass that I am currently stood on? Well, the answer lies in this humble vegetable, the potato. Except it kind of doesn't. Here's how the history lesson normally goes. In 1580, Sir Walter Raleigh presents Queen Elizabeth with a new discovery from the Americas, the potato. The discovery is eventually picked up by the Irish, who realise they are able to grow a lot more calories than ever before. The human population grows enormously, so too does the potato population. That is until 1845, when an infectious water mould starts killing potato crops around the country, killing about 1 million people and forcing just as many people to migrate out of the country. Now, this framing of the so-called potato famine as a natural disaster isn't wrong per se, well, except the part about Sir Walter Raleigh that probably never happened. Also, the only reason they were so vulnerable was because there was such a small genetic pool. That's the potatoes, not the Irish. But most mainstream accounts miss out an important political dimension, and even fewer explore the economics of Angora Mór, the economics of the Irish potato famine. In the UK at the time, there were two parties you could vote for, the Conservatives and the Whigs, who, side note, got their name from the Scottish verb meaning to drive forward, not the artificial hairpiece.
When will you wear wigs?
The big debate at the time that ultimately ended up dividing party members against each other was about tariffs and restrictions on imports. I guess some things never change. The Corn Laws were a set of laws that protected the value of domestically grown grain by preventing the import of cheaper grains from abroad. Now, suppose you're a 19th century landlord and you make money by charging rent to tenants who grow crops on your agricultural land. Cheap imported grain is a threat to your tenants and ultimately to the value of your agricultural land. So you're probably going to be in favour of the Corn Laws. On the other hand, suppose you run a textiles factory and you want to sell your fabric to the rest of the world. In order to do that, you need the rest of the world to have enough pounds sterling to buy your fabric. And that's a lot easier if people from your country are spending their hard-earned pounds sterling buying cheap imported grain from the rest of the world. The MPs responsible for making these rules were largely motivated by self-interest. Some things never change, meaning that the landed gentry of the Conservative Party were more likely to be in favour of the Corn Laws, while the more diversified aristocrats of the Whigs were likely to be against them. But there was division within each party, most notably Robert Peel. I'm really sorry about that one. Peel was a Conservative with liberal tendencies. No, not that type of liberal. Okay, we'll go with that. The son of a self-made industrialist, an opposer of the Corn Laws, and Prime Minister in 1845 when Ireland's potato blight began. Now, more than ever, the Irish needed the ability to import food from abroad. Now, more than ever, there was a good reason to scrap the Corn Laws. It's difficult to tell how Peel actually felt about the famine, whether he genuinely cared for the Irish people or was just using it as an excuse to make the legislative changes that he wanted to make anyway. He did spend £100,000 worth of government funds buying maize from the US in order to feed the Irish people, but he also continued spending 10 times that on the military presence in Ireland in order to protect the private property of landlords. Unfortunately, the Corn Laws didn't make that much of a difference in Ireland. The thing about trade is you need something to sell if you want to buy anything. Belfast was famous for linen and for ships, rest in peace. But other than that, it was largely an agricultural economy. All they had to export was food, and the last thing they should have been doing in the middle of a famine was exporting food. At that point, Ireland needed to be a net importer of food. And yet, during a famine, whilst people are literally starving to death, Ireland was still a net exporter of food. Now, to understand why, we need to take a look at some Irish fields. Have you ever wondered why the Irish countryside looks a bit like this, with these long, thin strips of land? The fields where I'm from in England are huge, which works great for modern industrial farming. You just stick a load of one thing in a field. So why do these fields look so different? Well, in 19th century Ireland, pretty much all land was owned by English landlords. They would rent their land out to tenants, who would in turn sublet their land out to tenants, who in some cases would sublet, then this could keep going. But why? What was the point in renting such little land? Well, you couldn't do the sort of farming done by modern farmers today, but you could grow something small, something hardy, something nutritious. You could grow potatoes. Of course, there wasn't much of a market for selling potatoes, what with everyone growing them, so you wouldn't be able to pay your rent with it. But you could feed your family. Most people would work other jobs, aside from farming potatoes. Some would work on larger farms in Ireland or in Britain. Some would raise a pig or a goat. Some would fish. Some would work in construction. But the point was, the work was there to raise the funds to pay the rent for the land, which would then shelter and feed your family. If Irish tenants owe English landlords £10 million sterling in rent, what that means on a wider scale is that the Irish economy owes the English economy £10 million sterling worth of real resources. If your economy is primarily agricultural, that means £10 million sterling worth of food. So in the middle of a famine, whilst the people of Ireland were literally starving to death, they were being forced to sell food and export it out of the country so that they could afford to pay rent. Evictions during this time were very common when people couldn't afford to pay their rent, and these evictions were enacted by the state. This was common of the Conservatives, to use the state apparatus to protect the interests of private property. But all of this was to change in 1847 when the Whigs, the pro-free market lot, got elected. And when I say change, I mean for the worse. It's interesting how even the most laissez-faire free market advocates still believe in the state defending private property. If the Irish had just been left to their own devices, they'd have probably made it through. There was probably enough food to go around. They could have seized the land. They could have improved their fishing infrastructure. They could have found more productive crops, diversified their agriculture. They could have made it through, but the British state didn't let them. In fact, quite the opposite. Once they realised the small holdings weren't making quite as much money, landlords consolidated their land and kept things like cattle, which might be lucrative per acre, but they're massively inefficient calorie-wise, which only exacerbated the famine. The free market policies were enacted to help the Irish people, and they failed. And they ultimately ended up costing countless people's lives. It's easy to get bogged down in economics, to get overly academic, but it's important to remember every now and again, these economic models, they impact real people's lives. They have done for a very long time, and they will continue to do so. I don't think the MPs or the landlords living in England were evil per se. Trevelyan was, but that's for a different video. I just think they were so removed from reality, so committed to their economic doctrine, they couldn't see the blood on their hands. Some things never change.
By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl calling. My girl, they have you stole Trevelyan's corn, so the young might see the morn. Now a prison ship lies waiting in the bay. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young man calling. Nothing matters, Mary, when you're free. Against the famine and the crown, I thought they cut me down. Now you must raise our child in dignity. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. By a lonely harbour wall, I watched the last star falling, as the prison ship sailed out against the sky. When she'd live in hope and pray for her love in Botany Bay. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing, we had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry.